Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Psilocybin Says. I am your host, Eric Osborne, and today is another LSD episode that Courtney will not be with us for. I don't know what it is, but she just seems to opt out whenever there's an LSD-based conversation. Courtney, what is going on? Anyway, today we're talking with Cole Butler. Cole is a psychedelic research coordinator. He coordinates an LSD for anxiety clinical trial where he's also a trained dosing session monitor. Cole also conducts individual and group ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. He offers coaching and consulting services through his private practice, Lionheart Wellness. I'm going to leave some links to his website and his LinkedIn profile in the show notes. I hope you enjoy this conversation. It was quite insightful. He offered some anecdotal personal experiences of what some bad LSD settings are like and some more positive viewpoints on what it can look like for those who are seeking therapy or for those who are just seeking the benefits of LSD. We don't always have to classify it as therapy. You can just feel good. You can just have a better day. You can just relax into it and enjoy the ride. Remember, weird's where the work gets done, and it sure gets weird with LSD. All right, till next time. All right, Cole, welcome to Psilocybin Says.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are the first Coloradoan. Coloradan. How are you? How are you all? Who are you?
Coloradoan.
Coloradoan. Yeah, that I've spoken with since 122 has passed, I believe. So that hopefully will be a part of our conversation. Really excited to see what Colorado does in terms of psilocybin legalization, particularly in comparison with what has happened in Oregon. But just give our listeners a little bit more detail about the work that you're doing there, the studies that you're undertaking, and how you came into psychedelics for some background.
Yeah, absolutely. I do a few different things, pretty much everything professionally with psychedelics. My main role is as a study coordinator on the MindMed LSD for Anxiety clinical trial at Fort Collins, at Wellness Center in Fort Collins, Colorado. Also do some individual and group work with ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. Hoping to do some work with psilocybin now that Prop 122's passed. And that's kind of the basics of what I do. I do some research as well, writing papers and things. I'm on the track to become a therapist. As far as how I got into psychedelics, I mean, I've been interested in them for probably a good 10 years. I'm 27 now, so when I was a teenager, I was just fascinated by them. Had a lot of personal experiences throughout my life. And when I was about 20 years old, I think I had a really powerful experience with LSD that made me want to shift from a mechanical engineering career to a career in psychology. And I wasn't even thinking about doing psychedelic therapy or psychedelic research or anything. I just wanted to study psychology and kind of be on the therapist path. But I was interested in psychedelics. So as I started to learn about psychology, I started to see what MAPS was doing and other organizations. Really, it was mostly just MAPS back then in 2017 or so. But anyway, so started to learn a little bit, was kind of interested in the background. And then I was trying to identify, my research interests. Like people on the PhD path are always do some research. I'm like, well, the only thing I'm really interested in is psychedelics. But it's hard to do that, kind of brand yourself in that way in the professional space. But eventually I just kind of I'd done enough of the traditional research stuff. I kind of threw my hands up and said, whatever, this isn't who I am. Want to do the psychedelic research. I started networking with people, came to Colorado, got hooked up with some really good folks here, mainly Dr. Scott Shannon. And then the door started to kind of open. Yeah, since then it's just really taken off.
So excuse me, your personal practice with LSD, would you mind talking about that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. The first time I like to mention this because I was, I think, 16, and I took a half tab of what I thought was LSD, but it was really bitter. It just had like a horrible taste. And I had a really bad trip, actually. I mean, I was like alone in this house in a sketchy neighborhood. It was dark. And it wasn't LSD. I'm pretty sure now it was 25I in bomb. And I've heard a professional in the space use the phrase, if it's bitter, it's a spitter, which I think is accurate. As you know, LSD, usually there's not much taste, maybe a little bit, but this tasted like I was licking a battery. So I had like what I would call a temporary psychotic break, like a drug-induced psychotic break, which sucked. And I thought I was never going to come back. And I thought I just fried my brain. It was really scary. And I said, I'm not doing this again. But I did. I tried. Yeah. I tried.
At what point did you determine that it was not LSD?
I don't know. I found out like maybe a year later. I can't remember exactly, but I really specifically recall like it tasting super bitter, and I found out later like it's not supposed to taste like that. Yeah, and it was just very different. I mean, there was a lot of visuals, kind of kaleidoscope visuals when I closed my eyes, but there was definitely like a thing of my thoughts were incoherent. There was no linking one thought to the next. It was just I'd have a new thought and then it'd be completely, disorganized from the next one. And I was just kind of like this, and I was terrified. I thought I just fried my brain. Like I said, I was 15 or 16 years old. And then in the later years, I tried real LSD, real psilocybin. Well, not that I had fake psilocybin, but I started to experiment with those. So I'd had some experience before, but there was one experience that was particularly powerful for me. It's kind of a long story, but it's probably worth telling. So I'm from Hot Springs, Arkansas. It's a small town in Arkansas. And at this time I was smoking a lot of weed. I don't smoke weed anymore, but I had a drug dealer, goes by Doc. And he was just a really cool guy. I was like, 18, 19, 20 around this time, and he was mid-30s, and we just connected on a lot of things like motorcycles and stuff like that. And he had a little trailer, but it was really nice. It was decked out. It was super clean in there. He had this big wraparound couch, really nice sound system, a really big flat screen TV, and like he had this old school pinball machine and all this cool stuff in there. And he was a good friend to me and my friends. I don't want to include my friends in this. I want to use their names, I'll say, but I'll just call them A and D. A is my longtime best friend for 15 plus years, and D was a mutual friend, so A's friend. So I used to go over there all the time. We'd buy a little weed. We'd probably like buy a gram, and Doc would smoke, more than a gram with us. He mostly just wanted to hang out with us. And we'd notice sometimes Doc would have like other young men over to like kind of help out around his place. He did a lot of like yard work stuff. Like he had a really nice lawnmower. It said like bad boy on it, and it probably cost like $7,000. He did a lot of yard work. And I think, these young guys would come over and they needed some mentorship and direction. So he would, give them little side jobs and stuff. I moved out of Hot Springs when I was 20, and I went off to college at University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. And I came back on Christmas break. So I've been gone about 6 months, and I wanted to hang out with my best friend. Like I said, that was a guy I'm calling A. And so I don't remember how I had some LSD or he had some LSD, and we said, oh, let's do some of this and go see our friend Doc, and hang out, and it'll be a nice, comfortable space to do this. Well, turns out in the 6 months or so that I had gone, our mutual friend Dee had kind of taken on this role with Doc of kind of being one of the young guys he mentors, but they had like a really close kind of relationship. Things had gotten dark in that 6-month period. I remember about a month before this, actually on Thanksgiving break, I'd come back as well, and I went over to this kid Dee's house, and he was like 19 maybe, and he showed me a gun that he had, and he handed it to me, and he said, look, check it out. And this guy Doc had bought the gun for him, and he was real bitter, Dee was, because he had been selling weed before, and he got robbed, and he would always talk about it. He was real kind of insecure about being robbed, so I think that's why the gun was bought for him. So we're back on Christmas break. We're going to go over to Doc's. We're going to have this LSD experience. We're excited. A had a mutual friend called Z, maybe Zane. We'll just go with Zane. I honestly don't even remember what the kid's name was, but he was maybe 18 years old. And yeah, he just didn't really have any direction. He was the kind of kid, probably didn't have a dad in his life either. I should say we probably all didn't really have dads in our lives in one way or another. And so anyway, A wants a mutual friend to go with him. And so we pick up this kid, Zane, and we all go over to Doc's. And D isn't there at this point, but he arrives later. But we sit down on the couch, I take some LSD, A takes some LSD, Zane takes some LSD. But when we got there, the lights were out in the trailer. And this guy, Doc, his mom's trailer was like kind of right outside his, so they kind of sat adjacent like that. And there was like a power cord that was running from Doc's mom's house to his house to power on the TV. And it was kind of one of these trailers, I guess you call them a shotgun trailer, where there's like the living room area, and then the kitchen, and then the bedroom. Say a shotgun trailer, because you could shoot a shotgun right
straight
through the whole
right.
thing. Yeah. You're familiar.
We have shotgun houses here, we call them. Yeah.
Okay. So there was a big blanket that was set up in between the living room and the kitchen. And used to, we just go right back into Doc's bedroom. He'd weigh up the weed for us. It was all cool. But now it was like that area was blocked off. So something was up. Couldn't pay his electrical bill for some reason. And if you can imagine, it's really dark in there. It's like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, sounding very shady. Very shady.
Yeah, oh my God, it was. But the only thing that was hooked up was the TV. And for whatever reason, Doc's like, oh, I'm going to put on Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. And he's like, every time I put it on, I have a bad trip. And I'm like, well, then don't put it on. I'm like, just please, then don't put it on. And he turns it on. Anyway, so it just totally set the tone for what was about to be a very weird night. Yeah, it was already kind of weird because the dynamic was like, A and I knew Doc well, we're all friends, and then we bring in this new kid that nobody knows, and he's tripping and we're tripping, and me and A are going back and forth talking. It's like, how do we include this kid? So it was already kind of uncomfortable. And then, the other kid, D, shows up at some point later on, and he really wanted to impress the new kid, Zane. You could just tell, he wanted to be cool. He wanted that attention. And he had this thing called an e-nail. It's like a way to plug something in that keeps the nail hot where you put the dabs on. Anyway, he was bragging about this e-nail, and it was so cool. And he had this fancy new $200 piece of technology, and he wanted everybody to hit it. And I'd smoked weed while on LSD before, and it wasn't particularly great. So I was like, no, I just want to have the LSD experience. And so I was like, nah, I'm good. And so at this point in time, like I'm sitting on the couch, I'm wearing a blue shirt, and this dude says out loud, that dude in a blue shirt's a bitch. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I was more perplexed than anything, because I'm like, what is going through your mind where like, I'm the only one in a blue shirt. We're all like sitting here and you're just going to say that out loud. I was more like, something is up with this kid.
And this was the Z guy, Z?
No, D. So this was kind of
the guy you had known. Okay.
Yeah, Doc's kind of mentee friend at this point. You know, he's trying to show off for Zane, trying to impress him. So he's trying to bring out this email, this cool thing, and say, everybody take a hit off of this. And I'm like, no. And
because you didn't want to. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to. And so he's like, oh, that dude in the blue shirt's bitch. And I'm like, what? I was, like I said, I was just perplexed. And anyway, so he was just acting really, really strange. And I remember that. I remember one other thing that he did. We had this kind of like half dome light. And I think the dab rig kind of like set on it like that, and it kind of changed colors. So he started waving the light around like this, trying to trip us out. And it was just like super awkward and uncomfortable and bad vibes. So anyway, there was just this nervous, uncomfortable energy that was like so powerful, you know, because this dude was like clearly unwell. And so, spoiler alert, if you haven't already put two and two together, it really took me a while to really put this together, but they were cooking meth in that trailer. Yeah, so that the whole reason there was that blanket set up was because behind there they had some sort of meth lab going on. In Arkansas, you know, there's really bad meth problems. So, I mean, it wasn't like that at all. When I knew Doc, you know, it was fine. It was nice just selling weed. But I guess at some point, him and this new kid, D, had kind of banded up and started cooking meth. Yeah, so if you can imagine, yeah, that's kind of why things were so unsettled and weird and uncomfortable. And so D and Doc would kind of pop off behind the curtain and be all quiet and like doing stuff, and it was just real strange. And at one point, you know, D and Doc stepped outside to smoke a cigarette or something. And so me and A and that kid Zane were all sitting on the couch, and it was just so uncomfortable at that point. It was sketchy. We didn't know what was going on. The vibes were just super weird. I think it was like almost 11:30 at night. And we were planning on hanging out, you know, until late. So we weren't thinking about driving or anything, but it was just so like sketch and uncomfortable at that point that I said, we need to get out of here. And so I made a crazy call, and I said, it's so bad, we need to leave. I'm going to drive. Don't recommend that. Please don't drive on any drug. But yeah, so my friend had like this old Mercury Grand Marquis. And if anybody knows that car, it's like driving a boat.
That's a big one, yeah.
Yeah. And the tires were like bald. This was like a 90s Mercury Grand Marquis, and I get in it and start driving, and it's raining, and we're like on the highway. It's like through the middle of town, and I'm going like 45 because it's like raining and the tires are barely holding on, and it needs an alignment, and I'm like this, and I'm like terrified. My pupils are huge. I drop off the kid. I go home. And at that point, I just go back into my bedroom, and I'm like, my mind is racing. I'm like, what the hell just happened? I was like, what was going on there? And at some point, I just had this big realization that something was really wrong with that kid D, and that I don't know, something happened. He wasn't well, and he had gone down this bad path. He was spiraling. And I wanted to be able to help people like him. He was so far gone. And so I just realized that I wanted to study psychology. I'd never thought anything about it before. I'd never considered it. I was a mechanical engineering student, but that wasn't working for me. And it was just like everything clicked at the same time. Like all these thoughts I'd had, I was studying spirituality, Buddhism, and kind of on a spiritual quest, I guess, and kind of all the information just integrated at the same time. And I was like, I need to study psychology. And it was just so obvious. Like I just had the answer. And the next morning I woke up, I changed my major, didn't think twice about it.
Wow.
Yeah. And then what makes the story so much crazier is that 2 weeks later, this kid D, as I mentioned, he had a gun. I held this gun in my hand just a couple of months earlier. He went to a movie theater parking lot to sell some weed to some people. Now, it turns out they were setting him up. It was like 3 or 4 people. It was like some guys like acting like they were a girl that wanted to buy some weed, but they were really planning to rob him. And so D gets to this parking lot. He's got his gun on him. He walks up to the car, and these people pull out a BB gun to rob him. But, it's like spray painted black or something. It looked like a real gun. Mm-hmm. D flips out, pulls out his gun, and shoots 2 of them. And
damn.
Yeah. And he ended up sending one to the hospital, shot him in the leg, I think, and the other guy died. So as far as I know, it's like 6 or 7 years later, and D's still in prison for that. And yeah, so that was like 2 weeks after, this LSD experience. So it was just kind of like I could see how far. Yeah. So.
Man, there's so much in that, right? Like just general mental health. I read some a report a few days ago about children in fatherless homes and their likelihood for crime, the likelihood for homelessness, all of that, how it just increases exponentially. And I think what really stands out to me, though, is how our failed policy around drugs has brought about so much additional suffering. Like how much of that could have been avoided had there been some sensible drug education, some sensible regulation around all drugs.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, there's so much throughout it. I'm even going back to the 25I experience, just not knowing, being a teenager. And as I understand, the threshold for overdose is actually pretty low on 25I. So, there's a lot there. Yeah, I'm with you.
So what has impressed me so much so far, what I've seen of you online anyway, and I just came across you through LinkedIn and have seen some of the stuff you're posting, and this story that you're telling now connects that even more, how important it is for anyone working in psychedelics to have real life experience with psychedelics. And I'm curious how do you process and understand, like, Oregon, for instance, that is not requiring therapists to have experience with the compounds that they will be administering, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's hard to require anybody to do it, I guess, but I definitely.
Well, why is it hard to require? If you're going to teach driving, don't you have to know how to drive? Or if you're going to teach firearm safety, don't you know how to how to do it yourself?
That's true. Yeah, I've had my concealed carry license, and you have to go shoot the gun and show that you can at least hit the target.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, you're right. It's so far out of our current cultural paradigm to imagine requiring, I guess. But when you say that, I am like, I don't know. Yeah, like, why not? My ketamine-assisted psychotherapy training, we do 2 experiential sessions. You do a sublingual session, you do an intramuscular session, and so as part of the training, everybody, does that. You get the didactic, download all the information about dosing and preparation, integration, etc., and then you just sit for somebody, and then you have the experience yourself. So I believe in that. We're putting together a psilocybin training right now, and integrating an experiential component kind of for our team here at Wellness Center. So it's definitely my personal philosophy. I put that quote up by Stan Groff because it just resonated so deeply about having the personal experience. And, up till this point, I've only told kind of negative stories, essentially. I've had really, really positive stories and safe containers, had really overwhelmingly positive LSD experiences. One of them led to the decision to have a child, so I got a child on the way, which kind of came together through a positive LSD experience. So, I think there's so much there, and I have had so many psychedelic experiences myself that it's almost a given. I can't see the perspective of somebody who's never had a psychedelic experience to be able to understand the knowledge that they don't have. But I do know that there have been so many times that I have gone into a psychedelic experience holding these expectations, imagining that it's going to be a certain way, and it blows my mind every time. It's never what I expect it to be. So there's really no describing the experience. You can only really feel it and go through it yourself. So I believe it's super important.
Can you talk a little bit about LSD as a therapy as compared to LSD as, I hesitate to say recreational, or maybe LSD in a more controlled environment versus LSD in like a park. I took LSD a couple weeks ago in a park, right? And it was extremely therapeutic for me. That's why I don't really want to make a distinguishment between recreational and therapeutic, but just kind of juxtaposing the clinical versus the maybe more free form approach. And what are some of the similarities? What are some of the differences? Just because, again, like I said before we started recording, LSD is still, I think, the most stigmatized psychedelic, right? And I'd love to help break down some of that barrier, help people understand the crossover and how, therapy doesn't have to be necessarily contained to a 4-wall clinic, but maybe a clinic can provide, additional safety or direction. So can you just talk about those two?
Yeah, gosh. Well, as you were kind of getting to, is kind of the containment, the therapeutic container. It's very intentional. It's easy for me. I've done LSD in a park a number of times, and I like having that freedom to explore, to step out into the world. If I needed to, I could talk to somebody on LSD. But that's not for everybody. I'm thinking like with ketamine, for example, a lot of people have at-home ketamine sessions, and I've always been of the philosophy that having your first one in a clinic with a therapist is good. And I guess I think kind of similarly there with LSD, like just knowing that you're really safe and that, you've met with your therapist, that they know what's going on with you, that, you trust them, that you're all coming into this space, you're not going to have to run into anybody. You're free to be yourself. You're free to have the experience. There's things there for you. That's real setting, like being set up intentionally. And I think you just kind of leave the door open to questionable setting if you're not being mindful about it, if you don't know like how to tweak the art of it. I'm a real big fan of kind of the art of set and setting, but that's, I think, almost a learned skill. Like if you want to have an LSD experience out in nature, like there's so much that goes into that. You got to know, can I trust myself under LSD? Do I have a backup? Do I understand nature? Do I know how to camp? Do I have somebody there to support me? Do I need somebody there to support me? That's almost like levels up the line. And if you don't know how to curate those aspects, you're kind of leaving the door open to ending up in a bad situation like I was in, like I wasn't being intentional. That bad experience I talked about, I kind of just ended up in what I thought was a nice place, and it turned out to be really, really bad, which was instructive. And, that experience can be very instructive. But, if you want to know that you're safe with people that are there to help, having the therapeutic container to have that experience can be really positive, and really, we're miles away from being able to really curate artful experiences in nature, which is, where I would like to go one day. But, there is a lot of stigma to break down to be able to understand all these things, to like put together a package where you can freely go out in nature and, walk around barefoot or smell some things outside and have the space to roam and still be safe. But yeah, at this point in my life, my most recent LSD experience, as I mentioned, was in nature, and I had kind of a private outdoor, it wasn't totally private, but it was like a secluded camping area with like a little lake and a forest, and I was with my partner, and I called my mom and talked in depth with her about what I was about to do and really thought it through. And, we said prayers and set intentions and held hands together and said, we're going into this together. We had everything safe. We had everything set up, plenty of water, food. We were both at the point where we could talk to somebody if we needed to. We knew ourselves in the psychedelic space enough. But again, that's kind of for the more experienced person. And I think for the newer person, having that container, which a lot of people are going to need, is really important.
So with LSD, though, for me, it's always been, I felt like I've always needed so much space. I've needed to be able to move from space to space, and LSD affords itself such a wonderful opportunity for a very dynamic setting where you can, because it's so long and there is so much energy, that you can really set up some, I have found anyway, setting up multiple kind of spots before I go in so that I can know, okay, let's go over here now, let's do this. And so within a clinical scenario, are people pretty much confined to a single room, or how does the process play out?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree with you. And, that's kind of one of the challenges, I guess, with like the fact that the LSD study that I'm on right now, is, I understand, at least in the United States, is the first one in like 50 years. And it's not, we're one of about 20 different sites that are running this clinical trial. And I can't get too deep into the specifics because the protocol is confidential. But, I think it just being a phase 2B FDA study, it's like the FDA, as much as I hate that they have to allow us, we have to ask permission, but they have allowed us to be able to conduct this study. They are putting up every safeguard possible. So there's like 30 different inclusion, exclusion criteria. And you're pretty much stuck in the clinic. You're pretty much in one room. You have access to a bathroom. You have 2 people sitting with you, and a physician on site or on call very close by. But you're pretty much, stuck to like a room in the clinic, which, isn't how off the record I recommend doing LSD per se. That's how it's done in the clinical trial. And I understand why that is from the FDA's perspective. It's not necessarily how I recommend it, but it's like if we're going through this above board process, they're going to do it as safe as possible. And then you can start to play with like, okay, what if we go for a walk? And I don't do underground psychedelic therapy. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I just don't practice in that way. But I imagine I would allow for more freedom. And my vision long term is to, be able to do it in nature, in like a center, retreat center kind of setting, where you can go from place to place, where you're free to roam, where you kind of have your safe spot, where there's people there to support. So I definitely believe in that. I don't, I didn't write this clinical trial per se, but I can see why, you kind of need to be bounded. And, But I definitely prefer the flexibility to walk around, to explore, to go to a different place, because you're right, it's such a long experience. There's a lot of energy. I've had LSD experiences out in nature several times. I've gone to a museum, and that's been one of the most amazing experiences, seeing the art in like 3D, moving, breathing, coming off the walls, coming alive. It's just fascinating, just be able to be in a museum and like look at like super high quality art pieces and see them come to life. So there's so much to be explored outside of being kind of stuck in a room. But that's how it needs to occur for the FDA.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it takes really to get this thing moving forward, specifically with LSD. Psilocybin obviously is near and dear to my heart, but I know that there is so much applicability with LSD, and I want to try to relate this most recent experience. I don't know how I possibly could. I guess what the big question that comes away, and that I came away from this most recent experience with, is just in relation to consciousness itself. With psilocybin, it seems that the access is so much more to this kind of, for me, this world of energy, right? Between humans, the plants, the planet, whereas LSD, the experience, it's so cerebral. It has so much to do, for me anyway, with stream of consciousness. And my curiosity around psychedelics has really moved much further beyond their ability to provide psychological relief, and is more into how can we use these tools to better understand the nature of consciousness. And I'm just curious what if you have any reflections on that, and maybe what you've seen in working with other people, maybe if you have some experience in comparing, LSD to psilocybin or DMT or other psychedelics. It's just so fascinating to me how these compounds can seem to reveal different facets of consciousness to us, and then kind of bringing all those pieces together to get a more holistic picture of what consciousness is. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, actually, that was really beautifully said. I find it so hard to kind of tease apart psilocybin and LSD. I saw a meme about it the other day. It was something like trying to explain the difference between psilocybin and LSD to somebody who doesn't know, and it's like super complicated and the fine details. But I think you said it beautifully in terms of, being more cerebral and not as much of like a energetic kind of connection. But oh gosh, yeah, it's complicated. I mean, I think, I've always kind of thought in this sort of Jungian way of the relationship between the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. And I think overall, as a society, especially in the West here, we're so disconnected from our subconscious mind, and we're not comfortable with our subconscious mind. And a lot of the times these psychedelics can kind of, as Rick Doblin said, kind of loosen the veil between the conscious and the subconscious. And it kind of puts us where like the dream state is subconscious, waking state is conscious. It kind of puts us in that in between state where there's normally kind of a flip of a switch. And now we can kind of understand both. And I think, so much of mental health kind of maladies, it's not super clear. Like, we don't understand them super well. Like, yes, you can kind of see like there's a pattern with like depression, for example, or what I know better is substance use disorder. Like you see these kind of reoccurring themes that you can extract out and write in the diagnostic criteria. But you meet somebody with substance use disorder, and there's so much going on there. It's complex. And nobody out here is perfect. So there's such a loose relationship and unclear understanding. It's not so well defined. So when we get into like some of maybe what's not going well, in that stream of consciousness way, you're kind of floating through all of that. Like, okay, well, either this is good or this is bad, or I know, and it's kind of exploring what's going on with all that. And then what I found with psychedelics is when you are in a good state of mind, when you've done a lot of your personal work, when there's been a lot of like work on yourself, that the psychedelic experience sometimes can break through that and integrate it all at once. Like, my experience realizing I wanted to study psychology wasn't just like, boom, there it is, like out of nowhere. Like I said, like I'd been reading a lot. I read a Ram Dass book actually when I was 18. It was Embracing Aging, Changing, and Dying. And I was like, what the heck? This sounds like it's written for old people. Why am I 18 years old reading this? And he was talking about LSD, was talking about, kind of being a death doula for people. And I thought it was really fascinating. I had an out-of-body experience at one point, and it was kind of taking me in this different direction where I was working on myself and figuring out myself. And then it was like all that stuff that I had been exploring kind of got to this point where it was like, okay, like all of that, like I can like take into a career, even though it had never occurred to me to study psychology up until that point, really. But yeah, I find especially with people that have never done a psychedelic but have a really strong spiritual practice and are like, oh, I don't need this because I already do all the work myself, like my mom, for example, has been a yoga teacher for like over 30 years and a teacher trainer, and started meditating when she was 14. Doesn't want to do a psychedelic because she's like, well, I don't understand why you need like a drug to have this spiritual growth. And I know other people like that, but I feel like in people like that can unlock so much. Like you've already done so much. So I think there's a lot to be said in terms of exploration, connection, unlocking things, and the mind of the person who's like doing well hell, quote unquote, but it's not linear. I think the conscious subconscious is so dynamic and hard to understand that there's something there for everybody. I think we've all got our stuff that we need to work on. In a way, it's a constant journey, so there's kind of always something that you can unlock or understand through these experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people who are the healthiest or who have, a consistent spiritual practice are some of those who stand to benefit the most from these experiences, and it's interesting. It feels to me whenever I hear someone say that, I'm already doing the work. I've already got a spiritual practice, or I feel like there is a fear in them that they're maybe not cognizant of. I love the line that Terrence McKenna said something like, people are afraid of psychedelics because something in them knows that they will actually do what they're purported to do. And it's really hard, no matter what your practice is, if it is grounded in kind of a baseline consciousness. I think that it's intimidating even for the most accomplished to go into that place that is seemingly out of control, right?
Yeah, it's a permanent unknown, which is why it's again, it's important to have the experience to know how to hold that experience for somebody else. But if you never do it, it's this unknown thing, and there's a real value to unlock and taking yourself there and being willing to go there, with yourself.
Absolutely. So how far away, how to even ask this question? So I would have never dreamed 10 years ago that we'd be seeing states legalizing psilocybin right now. Right. It completely blows me away. So it leads me to wonder, realistically, what kind of timeline are we on for LSD? I mean, this is the, Tim Leary, who I for some time thought, he was just this madman who crashed the psychedelic renaissance single-handedly. And then I watched Dying to Know. Have you seen that documentary?
No.
It's an incredible documentary where Ram Dass goes and visits Tim Leary while he's dying, and they have this beautiful conversation, and they recall their time together, and it really presented Leary in a very different light. And I came away from that with really massive respect for him and feeling like he was just way ahead of his time. And, all of my work with psilocybin and LSD, to the end of the day, the therapy is about enjoying life. That's where we're trying to get to, is realizing that this is all just a game and we're here to play and enjoy our time. And I feel like Leary actually realized that, way ahead of the game. But I'm so eager, because LSD has brought so much benefit to my life. I'm so eager for this to become more accessible and for people to let down their guard and for the lies of the Nixon era drug war to finally be proven false. So where are we at? So from somebody that's on the ground level with LSD, where are we in terms of it becoming accepted and accessible?
Yeah, well, as you know, it's nonlinear and kind of unclear, but I'm thinking about a lot of different factors and pathways, and one of them is just kind of more broadly the stigma, and unlocking the stigma is where I think doing right now in real time, as Timothy Leary did, getting the word out there, and really getting people to understand these things. And there's so much baggage, from the 60s, 70s, era drug war days. So I'd like to think that we're close. I think, some of the other angles from kind of legal regulatory perspectives are the kind of state level, federal level. If everything goes well with this phase 2B MindMed trial, it will be done in about a year. And then we can go on to phase 3, and that might take a year or two, and then they got to submit to the FDA, and that might take a year or two. So in my mind, on the federal pathway, LSD for anxiety is on about a 5-year timeline. But the basically formula for LSD that's used in this study, it's D-tartrate, which I understand is kind of like a salt form of LSD, rather than a free base. And so only, MindMed's proprietary blend will be available, and it will only be for anxiety, and that might be regulated in some way. And then what's going on with psilocybin currently is that, they're approving it at the state level, already in Oregon, already in Colorado, and now we're seeing other bills proposed. But there's no federal, laws in place. There's no protection against getting in federal trouble. It's basically like, just don't step on the Fed's toes. And you probably won't get in trouble. For marijuana, we're still unlocking that at the federal level. There is a law in place called the Cole Memorandum, which protects, I understand, marijuana companies from getting in federal trouble. So we don't have that right now for psilocybin. And who knows when that'll be rescheduled. But I guess I could see maybe like LSD at the state level. But we need psilocybin first. We need these other compounds first, and then maybe people will start taking risks with LSD. But we need to break down the stigma to allow that to happen.
Absolutely, which is one of the main reasons, again, like I said, I wanted to have you on here. So were you involved in Prop 122 at all?
One second here. I think my camera's lagging. I'm going to turn it to standard definition. Was I involved in Prop 122? I wasn't involved in the way, I guess I was. I kind of came in at the end of the game. I was talking a lot with my partner about opening a retreat center, especially after we had a powerful LSD experience in nature. We really want to be able to bring psychedelics in a natural setting to people. I'm a big outdoors fan. And I got invited to kind of a local benefit fundraiser deal here in Fort Collins by the Natural Medicine Health Act people who are the ones putting it together. My boss, Scott Shannon, he was pretty directly involved. He was a lot of the face on commercials and things, a lot of the public voice for psychedelics. So I went with him to a local kind of fundraising event. I put some of my own, money. I'm not a rich man at all, but I threw some pennies into the pot, and I started to kind of be a vocal advocate for Prop 122 in my personal life, on LinkedIn, just kind of educating people. So in that way I read Prop 122 kind of and realized that it was a pathway for a retreat center setting and also for decriminalization, and kind of that it really hit both of these points. I became concerned towards, the vote coming in that, it only allowed for the big players to enter the game, and that the big players would win out, which was kind of I understand, a collective concern. I realized as we voted that it wasn't up to me, that, millions of people voted for it, like over 3 million total, yes and no. And it won by a thin margin. It was like 52-48 or something. So I kind of realized, like, this isn't up to me. I think now, we're seeing from the healing center model that it is kind of like the people with all the money and the resources are winning out right now. They're the ones able to set this up. But the real positive is that, it really opens the door and moves us in the right direction. There's this decriminalization pathway, and kind of through that pathway, you can also practice like sitting for people. You can, do that for free. You can charge for it. But yeah, so I think it's a step in the right direction. I'm, involved in a few ways. I'm excited for this. So yeah.
So I had thought 122 was a little more accessible to the general public in terms of practitioners. I think there is a carve out for religious use. There is a personal use allowance, isn't there? It's just you can't, and gifting. It just can't be sold.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
like what about 122 kind of puts it in the hands of the big players, other than the fact that people with money are always going to be able to, build centers and advertise and do all of that. Are there specifics about 122 that kind of prevent, ground floor development?
Not exactly in the way that it's written. The personal use thing is very helpful. I think the people that put it together were trying to mitigate everything going into the hands of the big players. Big question mark is how implementation will actually roll out with the healing center pathway, because that's left in the hands of Colorado's Department of Regulatory Agencies, and they kind of oversee every license that's handed out. And so, healing centers and facilitators will pay a fee to Colorado to fund this advisory committee of about 14 people. And those 14 people will make all of the decisions. So it's more like a question mark. I don't think it's an intentional move on anybody's part to leave this in the hands of big players. I just think, like you said, in general, just the people with the money are going to get all the opportunities and leave the rest in the dirt. That's kind of more of a fact of life, I guess. And there was some concern by parties, and I don't entirely agree with that, that there needs to be more accessibility for the small players. And I think that's written in some way, like BIPOC folks can have like cheaper licensing fees or scholarships or something of that nature. I need to brush up a little bit on the act itself, but no, it's not written in entirely in that way. But it's just hard. It's hard for small players to be well resourced enough to get together something that's really, really have a center, have a clinic. But otherwise, as I stated, like right now, you can practice sitting for DMT, for mescaline, but not peyote, for ibogaine, and for psilocybin. Like you can share those, you can create them, you can take them, and there's protections in place to be able to sit for somebody on any of those agents. It's just a more formal, licensed healing center pathway that still needs to be worked out by the state. That's going to be kind of a tighter ship.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean that's where my hope is that, particularly with psilocybin, because it is so easy to grow your own mushrooms, to produce your own sacrament, as we call it in sanctuary, where I feel like the churches are going to have a greater opportunity to provide that kind of access. Where it is just like kind of grassroots, people just coming together, engaging in their practice, community support. I suspect that things like LSD and ibogaine and et cetera, that are a little more input in the creation will be different. But to envision a community support model that isn't, just from this kind of top down, we are, we're the certified by the state, I think we're going to see that as time goes on. It's going to take some time to adjust. People got to become comfortable with, psilocybin and its safety and efficacy. And then as people start to have more and more profound spiritual experiences, and they realize how important community is for integration and the ongoing benefits, then we'll see more of these kinds of models develop, and that will provide an opportunity for people like us. I mean, I don't have any money. We started Sanctuary with nothing, and it's growing. It's barely supporting us, but it is, supporting us as a family, and that's really all that matters to me. In terms of psilocybin, what's your relationship with psilocybin look like?
Yeah, I have a positive relationship with psilocybin, a healthy one. Yeah, gosh, it's so interwoven with my LSD experiences. We've talked a lot about my LSD experiences. It's interesting just looking back on my life, how much of a relationship I've had with LSD. But, there have been experiences I didn't talk about with LSD, and there have been a lot of psilocybin experiences, throughout the years. None are sticking out in particular to me right now. Maybe some of the lower dose ones that I've had recently. But yeah, no, I'm a big psilocybin advocate. As I mentioned, we're kind of putting together training and hoping to put something together with Prop 122. So yeah, I class it in with LSD in a lot of ways in my mind. It's just sort of brother and sister agents. As I understand, it might be a little bit safer than LSD, or maybe it's just that we don't know. But as I understand, the risk for psychotic break is actually lower on psilocybin. And again, we don't really have that research. I've heard that from a psychiatrist, local psychiatrist, Craig Heacock, that, psilocybin is super safe. But LSD, I have heard of people having that schizophrenic break. If you're predisposed, some people say that's not true. We don't have the research. But, you don't really hear that with psilocybin. And so I think psilocybin is friendlier. I think it's safer in a lot of ways. It has that appeal of, just being a mushroom. I'm a big fan of mushrooms in general, culinary mushrooms. I've foraged a lot of mushrooms. I'm into all that. So I think it's good. I like, the pathway right now that we have, sort of legally to roll out psilocybin. There you got the religious use pathways for accessibility, sort of medical use pathways, and kind of decrim pathways. That's how my boss Scott puts it. And, I think psilocybin fits well into all of those. We're seeing it in clinical trials, as you use it in a religious context. And also, we're now decriminalizing it. And I think it fits into all those. It's accessible to the lay public. It's really not many people that it's not well indicated for, well persons or, quote unquote unwell persons. So Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you compare them as brother and sister. I do see them so closely related, although I don't know, from my experience, which is relatively limited with LSD, particularly at high doses, most I've ever done is a 300 mic dose, but have seen high doses of psilocybin, excuse me, definitely bring about some breaks, during the session. And that's something I'm curious how the field is going to handle these experiences, whether or not we're going to try to medicate people back to baseline, or if we're going to allow the process to run its course, which has always been my approach. But yeah, no, there's so much to be seen here, and it's such a wonderful and open field right now. And I really appreciate yourself and your team and everybody that's helping to move the needle on this, in the eyes of the government, in the eyes of the public as well. So, I guess we always like to ask our interviewee what psilocybin says to them, but I'd like to ask you today to finish us off here. What does LSD say to you, Cole, since this is the compound that you seem to have the most experience and maybe affinity with?
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh my God, it's interesting. I feel like it's always, as I said, it's always been with me. It's affected me in so many ways. Even in some way, my daughter will be named after LSD. Her name is Ellis, and her middle name will be Darling, which is my partner's last name. So LSD, Ellis Darling.
I love it.
Yeah, man. I don't know. It's like, I don't want to say, but I don't know how else to make the analogy of a virus, but a positive virus, I guess, maybe something like a plant that grows in my mind or something. It's came into my life. It's opened doors for me. It feels like it just, yeah, I have such a weird and close relationship with it that I think it wants me to share it with the world, through this podcast and just speaking openly, through doing the work, through my own research. I can kind of unlock and unpack, what is the reality of this compound? What is the personal relationship with this compound? And that's, a beautiful mystery to me. I love a good mystery. I love unpacking a mystery. I love learning. And so that, really sits with me, is that there's a mystery here. But I think that, people tend to fill in unknown with their own fears. So if there's something that's not known, people's mind fills that with fear. And I think LSD gets a lot of that fear, all the cultural baggage, all the myths of holes in your brain and who knows what, jumping out of windows. I mean, that's all myth. But, it wants me to share its message. And I'm fine with that. I'm happy to do it. I'm here for it. I have the passion. I want it to be done safely. I think there's ways to do it safely, but you have to understand it. As I mentioned, there's an art to it. Alan Watts said that. I don't know the exact quote. He said something like, if you take a homeless guy off the street that doesn't know how to play piano, set him down at a piano, he's not going to know what to do with it. If you take a composer and set him down at a piano and he spent his whole life on this thing, then he's going to use that artfully. And so LSD is a tool, and you got to know how to set it up right, how to use it. So I think that's important. So that's definitely a message I want to spread with it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing here to spread this message. It's going to benefit so many into the future. It's impossible for us to see the impact of our actions right now. But I feel like, those of us who are moving the needle on psychedelic wellness are going to have we will be remembered, if not individually, our generation will be remembered for the healing that it has brought, and all those before us who have been subject to the unfair laws and imprisonment and judgment and just so much. So it's a beautiful road that we're on. I really feel that you have a beautiful heart. I've appreciated everything that I've seen you share, and the gratitude in which you seem to engage within the community. And I'm just very grateful to know that there are researchers like yourself out there who are having their own experience and bringing that into their professional work.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely hit a heartstring with the imprisonment, because I thought about that on my last LSD experience. There was almost this terror of engaging with society as I stepped out of this forest in front of this sort of crater lake, and I saw a helicopter fly in, and it was also kind of the place where society met me, like the middle ground between the forest, the world of society, and like town. And I kind of got this overwhelming feeling of like, well, what if I talk to somebody and they know I'm on LSD, or a park ranger or something, and they have this power over me and they can imprison me. And I just realized, that I'm competent in this space, that I could talk my way out of it, hopefully. But, just the fact that anybody could be imprisoned for wanting to unlock the secrets of their mind, to understand themselves, to do better. I can't imagine, that's a dark reality. And, so in some ways it's hard to even talk really openly about this thing that's totally illegal, and be like, I had an experience that in the eyes of the government, they could throw me in jail for, but it's so important. I don't ever want to think that I'd have to go to jail, or be imprisoned or face legal punishment. So, I've always kind of set myself up in that way, trying to give myself, a professional image. But, at some point you get so sterile, and it's not real, it's not authentic. And, you need to be able to really speak openly and put yourself on the line, even if it's kind of scary. So
100%. Oh God, that's so true. I identify with that so much. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I don't know, I'm just super grateful for, the world that I live in, because while I totally know and see the value of bringing psychedelics into the clinic, like for me, it's always just dirty, gritty, like I love the rawness that psychedelics bring about, and I can just dig into the dirt. So anyway, yeah, there's so much here to explore, and it's an interesting future that we have. And thank you so much for playing your part in helping it unfold, Cole.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.